Que pasa, mi amigos? It is Nima. And I want to talk about some of the kind of negative news in gaming. I hate these episodes, and I don't really like talking about some of this stuff. And so I decided just to kind of pack it all in one episode because it is stuff that we do need to talk about. And as this show is kind of a community effort, it's something that we're all interested in. We all know what's happening, and it's good to talk about it, and it's good to bring light to some of these subjects. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is California suing Activision Blizzard. And this has been a big story everywhere. And I'm sure most people know everything about it. But just to give you a little bit of recap, so California went in and had a lot of allegations against Activision Blizzard that were kind of, if you ask me, I think put under this like very weak umbrella of frat boy behavior. And the reality is it was much more dark than that. I mean, we're talking about anything from just lewd conduct to outright sexual, I'm going to say, sexual aggression, but it does go further than that. There is so much to that. And if you want to check out more of that story, I've got a video on it, and there's stuff everywhere. But I can just say that there was things from sending nude pics of some of the female employees to things like female employees not getting promotions because they're pregnant. Female employees being constantly harassed by their male employees. Male employees who were kind of, it was deemed acceptable for them to come in hungover and just sit around and play video games, but the female employees couldn't leave work to go pick up their kids from school. Things like that. There's a lot in there, and it really resulted in not only the death of a female employee, but the backlash from the gaming community as a whole. And for a while, it seemed like things were kind of going in the right direction. The CEO had resigned, and many other key figures had resigned. This happening after the stock went down for Activision Blizzard. And as in most things with big corporations, there is this facade that, things are improving, things are getting better. But we all know behind the scenes, that's what's not happening. And this is no different, as where some of the protests and some of the people who were actively going against Blizzard Activision by not pre-ordering things like Call of Duty, canceling their World of Warcraft accounts, and just purposely not purchasing their games. And we did, like I said, we saw the stock drive down, we saw key figures resign, but behind the scenes, we've just received more information here on Monday that the DFEH of California is actually alleging that Activision, I hate using the word alleging because they know, like, there is more to it than that, but whatever. They're working on another lawsuit where they're claiming that Activision Blizzard has been going through all of these sensitive materials and these documents that have to pertain to this case of sexual harassment, and they're shredding them. Not only that, Activision Blizzard is also having their employees sign agreements where they're not allowed to speak about. So these NDNAs that Blizzard Activision is signing, they're having their employees sign, is actually covering the employees from having to talk to the state, because it then becomes a legal issue. Not only that, they're telling them that instead of talking to the investigators from the state, they need to talk to Activision Blizzard's own HR. And then there's an employee confidentiality, apparently. I didn't even know that existed, which is kind of crazy that HR, an employee, can have confidentiality from the state who's actively investigating a very important case into your company. I mean, I don't know how much of a defense that is, considering I think a lot of companies would do that if they could. But I think for the most part, California is going after them for destroying documents that are pertaining to this case. And I think that it's just, I don't know. again, everything under here is an accusation, and we don't know what's real, what's not real. I'm assuming that in this scenario, Activision Blizzard is doing all of these things, right? I'm also assuming that if you still want to play the Call of Duty, it's fine, I guess. Like, it's what it is. Now, on that note with Call of Duty, I think we're going to see a drop in Call of Duty. And not only just from the backlash of this story, but from other things as well. Call of Duty has been around for a long time. And any series that comes out annually, basically, gets boring and gets stale. Especially something like Call of Duty, where they've just been phoning it in for a while as is. But this case, I don't know. The more and more I'm reading about it, and the more and more I'm seeing the way that Activision Blizzard is reacting, makes me want to stop purchasing any of their items, because they had an opportunity to change, and they could have said this happened years ago. This is this was a problem then, but it's not a problem now, and we're not going to continue this kind of behavior. And here we go, right off the bat, they're destroying documents that are related to this case. So not only did they do something bad, they had employees who've done things that are inappropriate, and I'm sure many of the CEOs involved in this company are also doing things that are inappropriate. They're also hiding it. So it's like they've denied it for the most part and said, oh, well, yeah, there was some questionable things, but it's not as bad as you think it is. And then they're also hiding it. So it's like, I don't know. For me, I'm personally pretty much done with them. And, if you're not, that's fine. That's who your choice. And finally, the last thing I wanted to talk about was the situation between WATA and Heritage Auctions. So both companies have two people that are really kind of important to the story. One of them is Dennis Kahn, who started WATA Gaming, and the other one being Jim Halpern, who is a co-founder of Heritage Auctions. Now, when WATA started back in 2017, one of the advisors that they listed was none other than Jim Halpern. Now, it's only really kind of important for people who early on understand where a lot of WATA games sold and where these big ticket items sold. So let's go back to 2019 when Heritage Auctions said that they were going to now sell video games. They started off doing things like coins and comic books and collectibles, rare things. They didn't really sell a lot of video games. Then they announced that they were going to be taking on WATA games. So WATA graded games would be things that Heritage Auctions sold, which is kind of crazy considering Jim Halpern was an advisor and was most likely taking money from WATA. Now, they didn't disclose this, and I guess they don't have to, but it's dirty. It's dirty that you don't do it. You can actually even look back further, because they made headlines when one of the big games on that list of notable big sellers, coming out from being the very biggest selling game at the time, was a sealed copy of Mario Brothers for the NES. And the number, $100,000 is what it sold for, does seem pretty low now, because these same two guys have been working together to get that game to go up to $2 million, I believe, is the last price that it sold for. But I digress. Let's take back to that $100,000 game. And what's interesting about it is this game was actually on Pawn Stars. The old people TV show. It was on there. And this game was trying to be... The seller who ended up selling it on Heritage Auctions was trying to sell it to Rick and the Pawn Stars people for like $1 million. Well, the Pawn Stars guy had concerns, and he even said, well, I know WATA is the most reputable place in gaming grading, and I know that that's a big industry, so let me call Dennis Kahn to come and check it out. And of course, there's Dennis Kahn up there, and he's saying, oh, this game is so rare, it's worth so, I've heard offers of like 300,000 being turned down on this game. And it's a special edition game. I get it. It's very early, 1986, 1985, I think is when they said. And it had a special seal on it. It wasn't the saran wrap kind of thing. But it had, whatever. But he specifically said, oh, I've heard 300,000, turned down. And then Rick turned around, gave Wada a lot of credit, gave Dennis, oh yeah, well I know you know what you're talking about, but I'm just not ready to dump into that kind of money. Well, turns out that the original individual who went in to sell that game did end up selling it, and he did sell it on Heritage Auctions for $100,000, which I think is kind of funny, because if you already break down that statement, Dennis Kahns, who was the one who graded it from Wada, who was the big, advisor even to the Pawn Stars people, said, I have heard of offers being turned down at 300,000. Well, so then why did it only sell for 100,000 a year later? It already seems like he's lying about something. And just, I don't know, I understand you can take guesses and be wrong. That's a giant whiff. But I digress, because that's still not that important. The important thing is that the game that was so rare and so hard to get, and I'm sure it's rare and worth some money, but that $100,000 that the seller got for it was finally, it was disclosed who purchased it, and it was 3 different people. One of the people who purchased it was none other than Jim Halpern, the guy who owns Heritage Auctions. So the company he works for, or kind of advises for, Wada, graded this game. I wouldn't be surprised if they put some money into the Pawn Stars people's pocket to kind of showcase this game. Then they turn around and put it up for auction a year later, and then he buys it for $100,000. That just doesn't add up. I don't know if it's illegal, and I would love to find out what can actually be disclosed, and how this works with like things like the pump and dumps. And I know market manipulation is totally illegal, but does that really apply to video games? I think this is probably more a situation of just a giant grift. And the thing is, where Dennis Kahns and Jim Halpern made the mistake is they're trying to con gamers. And you don't do that, because we really look at situations, and if people are doing things that are less than reputable or being swindly, we'll call them out on it. We don't put up with this crap. And you might ask, okay, but what was the whole point of all this? Now, as far as I'm aware, before this whole hubbub with the $100,000 game, Wada was okay. It was doing fine. But now Wada is blowing up because everybody thinks that their sealed copy of any sort of game is worth a lot of money. And in fact, if you go to like Heritage Auctions, you can see a ton of Wada graded games, like Gears of War 3 I saw going for like $1,500. Who the hell is paying for a sealed copy of Gears of War? That's a game that you could find probably in like an old Target or something. Like, it's an Xbox 360 game. It's not worth $1,500. I don't care what condition it's in. And Wada has a huge waiting list for you to grade, to get your product graded by them. And they'll grade anything. They'll grade loose cartridges, boxes by themselves, obviously CIB kind of products. But this obviously has done nothing but help the stock of Wada and help their money in general. Not to mention, it's helped Heritage Auctions as well. Because every time these Mario games, and it has been really a lot focused on Mario for the NES, when these sell for $1 million, the last one being $2 million, they get a ton of pub. And a lot of people are saying, well, I didn't know video game collecting was such a big thing. I didn't know these games are worth so much money. But they're probably not. And that was a thing that I first talked about here a week or so ago, when the Mario game sold for $2 million. I said, something isn't right here. And the reason why I kind of caught that was because if you told me, hey, a sealed copy of like Persona 2 or Suikoden 1 or something like that sold for $100,000, I would still be like, that's not worth it, but it would make sense to me. Okay, well, finding a disc alone of some of these like old games, I think like Persona 2 is like over $800 for the disc alone. I guess if you had a perfectly sealed early released copy of that game, I could kind of see some of that cost. But even the Mario Brothers for the NES that sold for like $2 million, that's not even the one we're talking about. That's a different copy of the Mario Brothers. That one was like a 9.8 for the WATA grading, and that one sold for $2 million. The Mario N64, the sealed copy of that one, there's another one. I'm just scrolling. I just forgot about that. All of these games are being pushed out, and the market itself is being falsely inflated by two very sketchy individuals, Jim Halpern and Dennis Kahn. And I just think that's something that we should all be aware of, especially for some of us who are more into the retro gaming and into the video game collecting in general. It really stinks because it's not a time that you should be collecting, probably. This is probably a time when, if you were in things like the stock market, they would be telling you to, hold, don't, or sell, don't buy, not yet. But for us gamers, it's not about, hey, I've got a original in-box version of Earthbound. It's about playing Earthbound. It's about enjoying the game. And as we've seen Nintendo come down on people who are, emulating ROMs, it's hard enough to actually be able to play some of these games. I don't know. We're stuck in a rock and a hard spot, and I don't know. That's why I wanted to report on this situation. Now, Carl Jobst, who's a YouTuber, has a much better, deeper dive into this whole thing. I just kind of, took out some of the interesting points of it and summarized it here. But I definitely recommend watching his video. It is like 52 minutes, so it's kind of long, but it's definitely worth watching it. RGT85 and Spawnwave have also talked about this as well. And I'm sure I missed some certain things on that. I really want to just get the whole point across that this is shady, it's market manipulation, and most likely it is a pump and dump. And there's a lot of us who are sitting on maybe expensive games who are just, this is going to be my retirement. And at the end of the day, your old copy of like Sonic 2 is not going to be worth $1 million. I'm sorry. It sucks. Sort of. I mean, let's be honest. I also want to play Sonic 2, so it's good that it's not worth $1 million. But I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. Anyway, guys, have a great day.